And I feel like this is so the mission of Leafly that just keeps us motivated going year after year. What should I try? What should I try? The mixing and matching and finding what is right for you is a journey.
You're listening to What Fuels You, where we deep dive with CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders to learn more about their stories and uncover nuggets of wisdom we can all use. I'm your host, Shauna Swerland, CEO of Fuel Talent, an award-winning recruiting firm based in Seattle. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Yoko Miyashita, CEO of Leafly, the go-to platform for cannabis education, discovery, and community. Yoko joined Leafly in 2019 as general counsel and stepped into the CEO role the following year, right in the middle of the pandemic and a major turning point for the industry. Born in Japan and raised in the US, Yoko spent much of her childhood translating for her immigrant parents, an experience that gave her an early understanding of voice, access, and responsibility. That thread has carried through her career, from practicing law to leading through change. Before Leafly, Yoko spent over a decade at Getty Images as SVP and General Counsel, guiding the company through the global legal strategy during a time of massive digital transformation. She's a UC Berkeley and UW Law School grad. At Leafly, Yoko is helping shape what the future of cannabis can look like, centered around trust, education, and community. Welcome, Yoko. So good to see you.
So great to see you and so great to be on.
I'm really pumped. I've been following Leafly for a long time, and I love that there is a female CEO badass running the company. And I'm excited for our listeners to learn more about the industry, learn more about you. But first, we're going to hit you with some rapid fire.
All right, let's go.
Okay. What is your favorite city?
Kyoto, Japan. My hometown. It's an interesting one because I was born in Japan, but I've been raised in the States. I've been here since I was 18 months old. But my family, my father's side of the family is from Kyoto, and we went back as kids every 3 years. We'd spend summers there. I try to get back there with my own kids at least once a year. And
That's incredible.
it's almost a visceral feeling of touching feet to ground there and feeling home.
Well, it's beautiful. I mean, Kyoto's unlike any place I've visited, and I loved Tokyo, I loved Osaka. I am dying to just have a whole podcast talking about the Japanese culture. It was like I was excited to go, and I didn't realize how much I would take away from that
It is a
visit.
feeling. I'm so glad. I want to help with your podcast. We have so many ideas that we've exchanged here already.
I know. I'm like, this is the
Count me in
rapid
for
part
that
too.
one.
We'll get into Japan, but do you have a favorite or a go-to quote that you like to kind of remind yourself of when you need inspiration?
Ooh, I don't have a particular quote. I have ideas. I'm sort of
Tell me the
right
ideas, like
now, I'm
concepts.
really vibing on flow and really listening to where flow is throughout. And you can talk about that in the professional space. My free time spaces, I love to run, just family life, friendships. Where's the flow? And that's where I'm kind of vibing right now.
Yeah, and what do you do when there's not flow? How do you get out of those situations? Because everybody wants a piece of you, I'm guessing.
I think the work I've been trying to do is really figure out like the pause button, right? Like we are go, go, go in every aspects of our lives as mothers, as CEOs, as friends, as partners, and just learning that there is a pause button and that we are allowed to push it. That's
Yeah,
sort of been the key.
that is such a lesson. I think you might be younger than me, but that's the zone I'm in right now too, is the when to hit the throttle and when to hit pause and how to not worry about what other people think and how to please them.
I call that like the absolute beauty and other side for women. And to be entering into that space is so liberating and so fun.
Yeah, I agree. It's a daily lesson for me though, because I have like massive disease to please and need to please. So I think it's good. Okay, so what is a quality or something or someone that impresses you?
Curiosity without judgment.
Love
And I
that.
see it like I'm a naturally curious person. My motivating is the why, but that why has that edge, that judge it can have a judgy edge to it But when you can go with that curiosity and openness, like that's an amazing space. And when I watch other people exercise that attribute, I am in awe and like constant learning mode there. Oh, that's
Yeah.
really amazing because it just opens up so many different channels.
Well, I'm sure you've had your experience of, and I have that as one of my kind of things I want to dive into around Leafly, the industry, how you kind of navigate constant conversations around it, because that's a natural question. Like, what do you do? And then I'm guessing when people are like, oh, I'm in like cloud computing, it's like, well, that's cool. But you're like, I'm actually in the cannabis space. Like, there's so many opinions, curiosities, judgments, all the things around it. And I'm dying to get into it with you. Is there something for you personally that you do to, you said you're a runner. Besides running, what do you do to kind of lift your mood or shift your energy?
I have started over from pandemic onwards, is like starting the day right has become ritualistic for me. And that is like either stretching or yoga. And it sounds cliche, but I have found that that consistency of practice is it is so, it feels so selfish in some ways, but all of that is like the foundation for making everything ahead of me go well. And so like
I love that. Do you do like a full-blown yoga, like, half hour of yoga, or you're talking like
that's
five
like a
minutes of
20
stretching?
minutes of stretching. It's just going to depend on the day. How does my morning look? How much do I have? But if I have 15 to 20 minutes or 30 minutes to just do that totally self-absorbing behavior and
Hmm.
routine, like I just know the day's going to go
Are
well.
you following like an app or are you just doing your own flow?
I follow just a handful of folks on YouTube, and like there's also great joy in doing it. And then I send it to my friends in the morning of like, here's
Send
what
it
I
to
did.
me. I try to go do yoga and I do hot yoga and I love it. But I do find like just that morning ritual is something I'm missing and I keep trying to incorporate something aside from going right on my phone. I
Oh,
do the New York, like all the Wordle and all those things, but I'm like, no, no, no. Don't look at your phone. Do some movement, drink the water, the blah, blah, blah.
it's like the movement piece, and then I'm just finding this great joy in like sharing it with my friends. Here, go try this.
Yeah, I know women are the best like that. It's always the best. If you could instantly master some new skill, what would it be?
Sewing.
Oh yeah,
And
that would be cool.
I have a little story behind this. And like to me, this is going to be the gateway to a different chapter because I grew up with my mom was stay at home. My mom was a homemaker, but my mom is like crafty. She could sew, she could knit, she could do all of these amazing things. And like she would just move from one thing to another of like this activity where she's using her hands, she's using her eyes, she's learning as she goes, she's making mistakes and recreating. And like there's just this I feel like that's unlocked in my life of I've been really sort of working from here in this
Yeah,
headspace
from
or
your
the
brain.
physical
Yeah,
space,
right.
but like what does it mean to create from from
From your
hands?
hands. Yeah.
And so sewing right now is I've just come home with a sewing machine that I picked up at my sister's house, and I'm like,
That's so cool.
I just want to figure this out. And
That's
it's a
really
different
amazing.
kind of figuring out from what we do in our day to
Do
day.
you cook?
I love to cook.
Yeah, so
I love
cooking's
to
using
cook.
your hands.
It
And
is using
like
my hands.
gardening is using your
Totally.
hands.
And like, I haven't mastered the gardening piece because I managed to kill everything in my yard. But like
Yeah.
it's just a different kind of creation and I want to explore that.
That would be next level. And I feel like it's like also a lost art. Like so many people are like, oh, my mom
Right?
did it or my grandmother did it. But people today, that would be super cool. It's awesome. I love that. In your abundant spare time that you're like, I think I'll learn how to sew. And what about some words? Give me three words that your team would use to describe you as a leader.
There are like there's like aspirational three words, right? Like
We can go with those. I have my own
or
aspirational words.
I'd like to think they would think there's diligent and detailed, authentic, and here's the real hope, open.
Yeah, I'm sure you're all those things. I'm sure. Now I'm gonna like interview them. No, I'm kidding. I've heard incredible things about you, just so that you know, and I'm sure that your team feels these ways. Okay, here's my question that I'm sure everybody else wants to know too. What is one of the craziest, or I guess maybe even just the most frequent question that you get about cannabis in general? Is it about what's the best-selling strain, or is it about, federal laws? Like what are people asking you all the time that you're like, oh my God, if I could just put a sign together?
It is so basic, and I think it's a function given our sort of age and demographic of like, where do I start? Right? What
Oh,
should
so
I
people that just don't
try?
smoke or
Yeah,
don't take edibles and they're like,
exactly.
what do you recommend?
Exactly. They want to know. And I feel like this is so the mission of Leafly that just keeps us motivated going year after year. What should I try? What should I try? And it seems like such a simple thing, but what I am so engaged about with this particular industry is that this plant is magical and it has such unique attributes. And it's not just the chemical composition of the plant, which is a highly complex plant, but because you have to match it up with our endocannabinoid systems, which are unique in each and every one of us, the mixing and matching and finding what is right for you is a journey. I like getting people to how do you take something that's so multifactored and complex and simplify it for this person who's just getting started.
Don't you have people in your life? Like I can think of people in my life that I know would benefit from using cannabis, but for whatever reason they have fear, judgment, whatever it is, they maybe had a bad experience in high school and they just like took too much or
Right.
whatever. And you want to tell them, so what is your second question that you ask back? Like what feeling are you looking for? Or how do you
What
want
do
to
you
ingest
why
it?
how are you let's like it's not a logical progression, right? Like there's so much to unpack together. What do you want out of this? What do you think you want to tell me where you've been on your journey? Like my question for you is like, where are we picking up on this journey together? Because I want to
Mm-hmm.
really help you. I want to help you with the latest science. I want to help you with the latest information. I want to help you with data to guide you on this journey. And like it I just find that unpacking whatever it is, that bad experience you had 5 years ago, that bad experience you had 30 years ago, that bad experience your family member had. Let's unpack all of that. Oh, and
Mm-hmm.
also let's unpack the 100 years of programming, right? Like stereotypes and stigma and unpack it together
Yeah.
so you can figure out, is this right for you? All right, where should we go?
Yeah. So you said that there's different types of cannabis and then there's also different types of, would you say that the person's makeup is made of what?
Our endocannabinoid systems, right? Like this,
Endocannabinoid
it's
systems. I'm glad
it's our
ChatGPT that.
receptors, right? For it's how we process the cannabis plant when we
Oh,
ingest it. And
so can you put that into Leafly? Like, how do we find out our endocannabinoid? How do we find that
this is
out?
unique to it's your own body and it's your own physiology. But what you can understand is, and why we really encourage this is a test and learn for each and every individual, is you try and you assess and you track how has this made me feel, right? And why this gets really interesting and complex is because we were talking about you and I could try the exact same strain of cannabis, of which there are thousands, and we would have very different reactions to that exact same strain of cannabis because we have these unique endocannabinoid systems. But also, if you smoked it and I ingested a form of edible that derived from the exact same plant, we could have different effects because how our bodies uptake active ingredients in cannabis differs depending on our form factor.
It's so
So
fascinating.
it's so complex and it's so fascinating. It's
It's so funny though, because it's like, for people that do partake and enjoy cannabis, it's funny that like pre-legalization that it would just be like, oh, somebody has weed and people are just smoking it. And now it's like, well, what exactly? And it's almost like people think that they're having a glass of wine, like, they want to know every detail about it. And I just think it is so complex, and yet it's also not that complex. Like it's
and
just
it's
a
the
great plant.
and you can have it be as complex as you want it to be, right? Like this
Yeah.
is choose your own adventure. You want to keep it simple? Let's keep it simple. You want to go deep? Let's unpack it for you in what could be better than what we have today with data and technology to help consumers figure that out.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for our listeners to learn more about like specifically what Leafly is. But I have you on the podcast because I want to know about you. So you said your mom was a stay-at-home mom and that you were born in Japan. You came here when you're 18 months old. What about your dad?
My dad, both parents Japanese. My whole extended family is in Japan. They were the only siblings of from their respective families to come to the US.
And what
And
brought them here?
so my grandfather started a nuts and bolts business in Japan. It was a family-run business. All of the brothers and they had one sister on my dad's side. Her husband all worked in the family business, and my grandfather had a vision to expand the business to the US. And my dad was the one to raise his hand and say, I will move to the US with my three kids, later added a fourth. And my mom, in a very traditional Asian wife sort of way, was like, all right, we're moving to the US. They went from Kyoto to Chicago, where they had to stop so my dad could learn how to speak English because he did not understand or speak a lick of English.
Wow.
And then we moved to Texas because when you are manufacturing and selling very large scale nuts and bolts, you're working with the oil industry.
And how did the business go? And how is the business still happening?
The business, my father is now retired. It is in sold to various different parts, but it was a journey that took my family to Texas, to Los Angeles, and my parents later moved out to India and then into the Middle East, and they're now
Oh,
retired in
wow. So
Japan.
they really expanded the business. And did any of your siblings go into the family business?
No, everyone is all doing very different parts of the business. It's actually a really interesting and, and somewhat sad tale of watching small and medium businesses in Japan sort of explode under the way to really collapse under the pressure of both globalization, real estate bubbles, and they've all gone on to different careers. And you've got two lawyers, and across my siblings, two of us are lawyers. One is I guess I'm a former lawyer. That would be a good,
Well,
well,
yeah, once a lawyer, always a
influence,
lawyer. Isn't it kind of like
probably.
that?
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
bit, right?
So
Old
I
habits,
know that
hard
you
to
said that
break.
you translated for your parents growing up. How has being, I guess, first generation, right?
Oh, yeah.
How has that shaped kind of your view of the world and also just kind of how you've even chosen to raise your own kids? Like hold on to those values, hold on to those customs and traditions, or did your family totally try to assimilate?
Oh, goodness, no. You just come to a family gathering at our house. You will always hear two languages and a mishmash of both going at once. My parents raised us, we all speak Japanese with our parents. We speak in English to one another. We have various languages circulating because of who's married in or where we've had kids. And so it's a kind of cacophony. It's a really interesting way to grow up in terms of one foot in both worlds, never 2 feet in a firm ground.
Hmm.
And I'm so grateful for it now, where when you're still navigating who am I, what does this
Oh yeah,
mean?
as a
It can be
kid,
so
yeah,
uncertain. And I'm,
everybody
of
wants to, blend in to the best of their ability, whether
course,
they're any culture, let alone we speak different languages in our home, or we might eat different foods in our home. And that causes as kids, like, I just want to be like French fries and burgers like everyone else.
100%. And
Yeah.
what's been super interesting is I'm raising multiracial kids. My husband is, and their father is not Japanese. And what I've really focused on and am so pleased about is that I've been really able to reinforce that identity for my kids around being Japanese. And I think it's been an interesting thing to watch them sort of embrace that. I used to sort of test them. Hey, what are you guys? What do you think? How do you self-identify?
Yeah.
And it was a little surreptitious, but I really wanted to understand how are they internalizing some of these signals? What's going on around them? And it really is important to me that they'll say I'm Japanese, right?
Yeah, and that they're rooted in their identity around that culture because it's who you are, it's who they are. I completely subscribe to that. That there's a whole idea around I want to feel proud of who I am. Also, share that and be comfortable sharing that and not try to hide that, but also not judge that somebody has to be like me. Like that's what makes the
A
world go
hundred, a
round.
100%. And I also look at, right, what they've grown up in, what we've been able to raise them in is in an era of globalization, is in an era of widespread travel. And this is a function of being able to say, yeah, I am all of these things and be proud of that. That's so different than oftentimes how I felt growing up in some parts of the country. Like,
Hmm.
so that's really
Did you
cool.
ever experience any sort of, I guess, racism, anti-Asian hate, or I mean, we talk a lot about anti-Semitism now, like we're Jewish, and it's like
Right.
it's fascinating how many different people I've had on the podcast who have talked about their childhoods, and it's always like, what? But kids are cruel. Like it's
Kids are
nuts to hear these
cruel.
stories that people have shared, in our home over dinner, but also on the podcast. I'm like in shock by some of the CEOs I've had on and the way that they have overcome things.
It was so palpable for me as living in Texas and
Yeah, I would
feeling,
imagine.
and there weren't a lot of Japanese kids around, there weren't a lot of Asian kids around, right? There was a real color divide, and just again, these are visceral feelings you feel as a kid, and sort of that being so stark. And then moving to Los Angeles, and that felt a little bit different, but it was also there as well. And you know, I often think about I got into a fight in middle school when a boy called me a racial epithet, and I was I'm a strong, big, athletic kid, and got into sort of a physical
I
altercation, and
love it. Let it
I'll
rip.
never forget that. My yeah, and my cousin will tell me this. He went to school with us. He lived with us, and he's like, "Oh, I was hiding around the corner. I was watching you in that."
Did you win? Did you beat him up? You beat the shit out of the
He was
kid.
kind of little.
Yeah,
I think
that's
we
so
made friends
funny.
maybe 3 years later, but
Yeah. So what were you, so did you go to high school in LA then,
I
or?
did. Yeah, I finished high school in LA, and I like to say I've been working my way up the West Coast. Finished high school in LA, was in Berkeley for undergrad, and been in Seattle for 30 years now.
Yeah. And how did you choose Berkeley? Like who was guiding you through that whole process of
It
the kind of, I mean, think about us now, right? I know you've got a college age child and just thinking through what their like experiences versus our experience.
it's so different now, right? Like the pressure of what
Right. And how
they're
would
up
we
to.
get into these
I
schools?
know.
Like I look at where I got into school, I'm like, I would never get in today. Cal's a great school. I know you studied ethnic studies. How did you decide on that major and on Cal?
Coming as a kid growing up in LA, I always felt a little bit a fish out of water. I was a pretty serious sort of intellectual. Thought of myself as a really sort of serious student, intellectual, love to read, love learning. And LA, it felt to me at the time much more superficial. Like, where's the
Yeah, I
love
can
of
see that.
books? And it was just a little. And I grew up, I was finishing high school around the Rodney King riots. And I
Mm,
remember sort of there was such a dissonance between what I was seeing on television, what I was experiencing in my, privileged bubble, and I couldn't quite reconcile these things. And when I got to Cal and I got to the campus, and my sister had gone there as well. But when I walked that campus, I was like, these are my people. I am meant to be here. I was flipping through the course catalog and I start reading this description of this major. I'm like, yep, this is what I'm supposed to study. This is why I'm here. This is how I'm wired. And like, those are those moments. And I think it started young. I know I'm going to follow, I'm going this way.
and were you in the zone of like, I want to save the world, or were you like, I want to be a lawyer? What did you want to be? Not that you should know, but maybe you did know. I didn't know.
Knew, but I knew that like rooted in that when people are like, what the heck is ethnic studies? It's history, but there are different perspectives to history, and we have to tell those stories. I think that's the foundational
Absolutely.
piece, right? Like, and to see history reframed and getting more of those voices heard, I just knew that I needed to hear, because I've studied the other stuff, but I want to see it and hear
Hmm.
about it and learn about it from those different perspectives. It's, and I think that's sort of one of the, if I had to pick a through line of what's happening from education through career, it's that. It's just shifting the lens a bit. on the same thing for that perspective.
And did you go straight to law school or did you work and then go to
No,
law
I
school?
worked, and it's interesting because I thought I would end up an academic at first, and I thought I would go and get my PhD and teach because I really I loved going to college, and I
I can
loved
see you being a
seminar,
teacher
and
because
I
you're very
loved.
clear in your speaking. And I know that, I mean, that's just how I am experiencing you, just even on the podcast. Like I've had enough of these interviews that I'm like, some people I'm like, wait, what? You're very measured in the way that you deliver thoughts. And I feel like you'd be such a good teacher.
That is the biggest compliment because I've always thought I'd be a horrid teacher. My sister is a school teacher, and I'm always looking at her in awe, going, I couldn't do what you do.
Yeah, maybe you could do it. You could do it on the side now. It could be kind of cool. Teach at UW.
Let's
So
go.
yeah, I see where you're saying I came up the coast. So it was
Came up the
Cal.
coast, went, thought about being an academic. I went and spent some time actually in a legal department. And I kind of had again, it was one of those sort of inklings. I'm like, I'm not going to be a litigator, but I am a transactional person. I like deals. I like putting things together. I like the creative energy. And then I ended up going to UW here for law school, and the rest
Yeah.
is history. And then
And
I'm
did you
not a
like, I
lawyer
mean, you've been in
now.
Seattle forever, so you obviously liked Seattle.
Loved Seattle. It was it's an interesting thing because my husband's a Berkeley native. I sort of like went up the coast, picked up a husband, moved
Nice.
up to
Good work.
Seattle along the way. But that was late 90s, and there was just an energy to the Bay Area, and we needed something smaller. End up going to law school here. He ended up becoming a firefighter here, and it's been an amazing place to raise kids.
Oh yeah, and a firefighter, given your career, how nice, because I know how that schedule works. So he can kind of be there in certain days to really like block, tackle, and help.
We talk about, right, women talk about the importance of having a co-equal partner. And there's not a day that goes by where I don't think about my career and how that happened as a result of his career choices and that piece. And, it was hard. I used to travel a lot in other roles and how we managed to do that. But I'm so
Yeah.
grateful now, not just to have had that support, but then, he retired a couple of years ago, but he's like, well, I need to retire so I can be the CEO of the household. And, we
Perfect
have,
timing when the kids start to leave. You're like, and I'm going to run the most beautiful household.
and we have a
You're
good
like,
chuckle about that, but like I cannot emphasize enough the importance of having that partner who can help you along that way. I've been such a beneficiary of that.
yeah, that totally makes sense. So when you graduated law school, you said you weren't going to be a litigator. Were you thinking like, what kind of law did you think you wanted to practice? You wanted to transact, but
I wanted to transact. I knew, I'm a little bit of a deal junkie. And so I went and worked for Perkins Coie here in
nice.
town. And that was amazing. And, such an interesting time to be a former Perkins alum, given the current climate, and very proud of what they're doing. But great foundation for what I went to do next, which was I went and worked with Getty Images for almost 15 years in their legal department.
And how is that transition for somebody who might be listening? I never know who's listening, so I'm asking the questions of like, okay, maybe there's a kid listening who's thinking about going to law school. How would you describe what the thought process is like and the hands-on, working in-house versus working at a law firm and how you use that skill set as a
I
lawyer?
wouldn't trade anything in the world for the technical training of working in a law firm, right?
Hmm.
It's the infamous, and this is the day when we would still mark documents up with red pens and just
The
seeing
redlining,
the
yeah.
redlining and sort of the mentorship from, your senior associates and your partners and why they're making these choices and how to look at an issue. But it was pretty clear that for me, of something like this wasn't going to be the long-term play here
Hmm.
for me. How do we use these tools to then go towards building something? And when you work in a law firm, you've got a small sliver of a window into what's happening. I also actually spent about 9 months on seconded to AT&T Wireless at the time, working with their in-house team on the expansion of their Caribbean network, which
So
is a
you got to
whole.
see like the work of a
Oh
general
yeah,
counsel.
working
Yeah.
closely with the international GC, Yukio Morikubo, who's an amazing GC in town here. And just being a part of that and just building something, it's that the hunger to build and create that I
Yeah, that
find
makes sense.
so
Versus being like
enticing.
more on the services side and you kind of go in and then you go out, you get to like be internal and be a part of building something.
I think when you're motivating, your motivation is the why and the curiosity piece. Like you have to understand the big piece that you're solving for and a part of.
Hmm.
Like that's my motivation. Like I want to understand this and understand which piece I'm working on to get towards this.
And do you think a GC, like a general counsel, can go into any industry and the law is the law is the law, or do you have to go deep and wide on that industry? Like, could you have lifted out a Getty and because that's a whole other industry. You can talk a little bit about what Getty does. We've done some work with Getty Images. Great company also.
amazing, amazing company, right? And if you're looking for a through line between Getty and Weed, like what the heck is going on? But
Yeah.
these are mission driven companies, right? There's purpose behind them, and there's an education piece, there's an information, there's an education. It's moving the world with pictures. An image speaks 1,000 words, 1,000,000 words in these days, and that ability and that power and how do you wield that is a really fascinating thing. But
I was just like, and a joint speaks 1,000 words. I'm just kidding.
joint speaks
I'm
a
trying to find like
thousand.
here, tell me more about this through line. I'm kidding.
But it's the law is the law is the law. No, the law is a starting point. The
Yeah.
law sets some of the cones that you're going to navigate through this. But like the bigger game is not the cones themselves. It's what's the path going to be as you carve through those cones. And, Getty's an interesting one because if you think about the underlying product, the product is a manifestation of legal rights. It's intellectual property.
Yes.
What rights are associated with this image? So I always thought about the product first and legal being part of that product. So the ability to work in an environment where the law and what I understood and the tools that I had around the law were part of creating the product was what kept me there for 15 years, and it was an amazing team. Really admire the work that the folks there do. But that's where I take the law and turn it into like my broader motivation. And coming into cannabis, living in Seattle, right, we're one of the first states to go recreational legal. And you think about the law as, again, setting the cones and the stage and the foundation for building an industry. The
Oh, that's it.
product,
I mean, talk about taking on a huge challenge slash opportunity. Going into cannabis, I mean, absolutely. But were you recruitable or were you pursuing? Like, were you just sitting at Getty, like, I'm never leaving, and somebody presented you an opportunity? Or did you go, you know what? I got to stay on the cutting edge of like what's happening in the world right now?
it's again one of those moments of like quick aha. But like I had actually stepped down from my role. I was planning to take a summer off with my
Oh,
kids.
love that.
Like Getty has gone through many iterations. We were public
Yes.
when I started. We went through 2 flips. It flipped a third time, and I thought, okay, I've been hired in as a baby lawyer. I ended my role there as general counsel. I have seen so many amazing things. It's okay to stop, pause and like
Yes.
reevaluate and pick something new. So I was in that pause mode. Summer's going to be great with my kids. I've never done this before.
Especially in Seattle.
And then I see the post for general counsel for Leafly. And my best friend, who also happens to be a lawyer, and we've worked together for many years as well, sees the post. And we send it. She sends it to me, and I send it to her with a note that says, "This is my next job." And she sends it to me with the exact same note. And you're like, I have to do this.
And what does Leafly do for the people who don't know Leafly?
Leafly we are rooted in education and information to help cannabis consumers navigate their cannabis journeys. What does that mean? I start with helping you understand this plant and then helping you understand and now pick the right product for you and find that with a licensed brand or retailer. Why is that important, right? We are in an industry in transition. There's still a lot of illicit market legacy market, and most mainstream consumers don't know. Like, we're in a state here where we've had legal cannabis for almost 15 years. We just walk into a dispensary and shop. In states that
Mhm.
don't have that, you better have information and armed, and you want to know and be able to purchase with confidence. We help you figure that out.
I guess if somebody were to go on Leafly, get educated, and then what? Then they walk into a store and seek out a certain brand, a certain strain, a certain feeling.
Yes, yes, and yes. Like, if you think about the current shopping experience, and it was interesting because I was in Palm Springs recently, and I was, high tourist traffic area, and California, of course, very mature cannabis market. But I like to go into dispensaries and watch the consumer interaction with the bud tender. These are the
Mhm.
folks that work behind the counter and help you pick what's right for you. And even watching like some knowledge of cannabis is so, like, this is so foreign to people. They don't even know what questions to ask. So I'm watching that individual journey that's happening, and you end up actually putting a lot of trust in this individual behind the counter, because some people are saying, I can't sleep. I've got pain. I'm dealing with, very personal health issues, and you're having that interaction with some stranger behind the counter. I think a lot about that as Leafly's opportunity to help inform you before you have that interaction. Maybe you don't want to go and have that in public with other people able to listen, but it's really to demystify the plant to help you and aid you in that journey.
Hmm. Interesting. And so you started there as general counsel. What was the process or catalyst to becoming CEO? And I mean, what a wild time. It was like 2020, is that right?
Absolute insanity.
Like that's crazy town. I remember because I started the podcast in 2019 and we would do it in a studio and like in person, and then it became on Zoom. And all my questions started to transition to like leading remotely and how do we do this? Like, because I was still doing the podcast once a week during all of COVID. And you and I didn't know each other at the time, but I'm so curious. I'm going to go back to COVID moments. Like, what was that like?
I have so many different thoughts on this from so many different perspectives, but let's talk about, like, leading through COVID. I'll
Yeah,
never
like, and how many
forget,
employees were there at the time?
right? Gosh, what were we at the time? We had had a layoff earlier in that year, but we were probably still close to 250
Yeah, that's a
at that
lot
time.
of freaking people
A
to
lot of
lead
people,
through
we were
this.
in a 20,000 square foot office, right? Like, that's how big we were. And I remember going in and, you know, I am as a general counsel, you're deeply rooted in crisis management, right? Like, that was my training. We used to send photographers to the craziest parts of the world. Like, I was trained at Getty to be a crisis manager, and you're looking for signals, and you are understanding, and your job as a general counsel is to be like a half step ahead of what's happening or what might happen.
But you get to be behind the scenes as a general counsel. Now you're CEO. All eyes
Oh,
are
it's
on
kind of
you.
crazy. But, like, imagine going in that moment is, we have to shut down the office. And I'll never forget the CEO at the time looking at me like, you're crazy.
Yeah. Who was the CEO at the time?
CEO was Tim Leslie. And, 2 days later, 2 or 3 days later, we were shutting down the office. And there's another crazy thing happening, right? George Floyd happens in, what
Yes.
is that, May of
Yeah.
2020. And what people don't realize is, like, think about this industry. Like, we are at the center of racial and criminal justice.
Mm,
Why? Because Black and Brown communities have disproportionately paid the price of prohibition, right?
100%.
4 times more likely to be incarcerated and punished
Yeah.
for cannabis possession or cannabis use. And you see an industry building, and and this is a crazy industry. We haven't even gotten into that, but ebbs and flows, and there are millions being made. But who's making that money, and what is fair, and how do we build this equitably? So you've got COVID happening, everyone's being sent home. You've got a racial reckoning for and it hits this industry particularly hard and causes a lot of soul searching. And there's a lot of, like, I totally understand our CEO at that time saying, not the right role, not really what we had in mind here in terms of what we were going to do with cannabis. And the board comes and says, hey, and there's a handful of execs, all of us sort of saying, what are we going to do here? And the board comes and says, will you step in? And I remember thinking, I'm the general counsel. I love this job. What are you thinking asking me to step in as the CEO of this organization? I have no idea. Well, I have a JD. It's not an MBA. Like,
But do you think in that way that you had like a little bit of imposter syndrome, or you just were like an identity thing around like, well, I'm not a CEO, I'm a general counsel, but
it's both, isn't it? Right? Like, I'm doing what I know how to do, which is to take care of crises, to take care of people. I often think about, I don't think it's in retrospect, I don't think it's an accident that, what were some of the most important skills on display at that point? I always think I call them my mothering skills.
oh yeah, the empathy, listening, yeah,
Where
all of
are
it.
you? Let me make space for you. Let's talk about this. What do you need? And like, I just remember just really having to try to make sense of, wait, okay, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And what's been surprising to you about like what it actually means to be a CEO?
I'm going to try to pull the positive thread from this, but it's going to start sounding a little negative. But my goodness, it's very seldom you get to feel the winds, right? And that's totally a function of allowing yourself to see and feel the wins is kind of what I can say 5 years into this role versus what I would have been able to say one or two. But there's a sort of I think my recent evolution of this is like feeling like you've fell short of where you wanted to get to, or I'm going to use fail, but I'm going to put that in air quotes. But picking yourself back up and doing it again or trying something different, that's the job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And where is the business now? You have how many employees now?
We are just about 120 people. And we are fully remote. There are a handful of us still concentrated in Seattle, so we'll get together here. But we have outposts, and we still have what I'll call clusters in Baltimore. We have a cluster in Austin, but we are fully
Hmm.
remote.
And how do you build culture remotely?
It is hard, right? But it is to me ritual. Which ones do you keep your ceremonies? And it's our all hands, and they happen monthly, and you know, our team meetings and our, cross-functional meetings. And I think I've really come to appreciate the consistency piece more than because you're often questioning, does this have substance? Does this have meaning? I'm like, nope, there isn't meaning to the consistency in doing this over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's so hard, right? I mean, we're in the office a couple days a week, but not everybody comes in and I don't force them to come in. But I'm an in-person person. Like I feel like I just get stuff done faster and quicker just turning to somebody versus the feeling of like, do I need to pick up the phone and make it a thing, or I'll just tell them when I see them. And it's just you have to create a certain like modus operandi. Like this is how we work. Don't hesitate. Pick up the phone
Right.
or keep bulleted notes when you want to talk to me and make it efficient. There's just got to be a way of like you creating kind of best processes as far as how to create a very efficient but cohesive company.
I would love, I was thinking about this weekend around what is the remote equivalent of the drive-by? Do you remember the drive-by?
Well,
The
yeah, my husband tried to
drive-by.
he was thinking about starting a business out of this in during COVID because we were talking about a lot about the serendipity and the kind of water cooler talk and the stuff that happens when you're just walking to your car or you're like, hey, I'm just gonna run and get a poke bowl. Like, do you want to walk with me? Whatever it is. And that's what happens at the office where I'm like, and our company's small enough that massive decisions get made because somebody like turns to me as I'm walking to the bathroom and they're like, I was thinking we could do this really cool, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that sounds great. Like we don't have a whole bunch of like layers to go
Right.
up. And I'm like, well, would they have picked up the phone and called me and said that? Or was it just this kind of like serendipitous moment?
So at a deficit as leader in the
It's
absence of the
hard.
drive-by.
Yeah, the drive-by. This is a lot of what the business, but I think that there's a lot of companies that are trying to create that. Are you guys thinking at all about coming back into the office, or is that ship sailed for the company?
Never say never, right? But and for a small technology company like ours, it's had some huge advantages in terms of, you like talent acquisition in Seattle and for technology roles, Leafly versus
Yeah, well, and also
who am I
just
competing
even
against?
accessing cheaper talent in other
Yeah,
markets and
yeah.
not having to go and compete against Google to go try to find some like software development engineer. That totally makes sense.
And this is like a truly local business, right? Every state has its own cannabis market. It is structured, it is organized, it is regulated in this very unique way. In which case, having talent in remote locations is really beneficial.
I'm sure. What are some, I guess, assumptions people make about the cannabis industry and what are your responses? Like, what are some typical things that you hear?
This is so again so multi-layered, right? Like there's let's start with the stereotypes that just come with weed.
Yeah,
Everyone's high, haha. Like, you can make all sorts of like assumptions around them productive, and that those are just kind of silly stereotypes about weed people. It is probably some of the smartest, most accomplished people who are used to actually tackling really hard problems, multifaceted problems that have come together, and we're all still trying to figure it out, going, how is this going to work? How do you make state legality work with it, federal illegality working with a patchwork of what's happening internationally? No one's quite figured it out. Oh, and by the way, capital access to capital is incredibly difficult in this space because it's so complex and it's federally not legal. So,
do you think it will become federally legal?
oh, I would have had a different answer for you depending 2 years ago, 3 years
Yeah,
ago,
right.
this year, who knows? So we work within the construct that we have, right? I am really curious about last year I was in Germany watching them go recreationally legal. There's movement now for medical cannabis in France. And like it will happen someday, but our job is to figure out our futures in the absence of waiting for legalization to happen.
Yeah. And how is it dealing with, I mean, you've got obviously employees, you've got consumers, you've got policymakers, you've got all the different kind of personas that you're dealing with. How important do you think it is that somebody has a positive personal experience with cannabis when you're dealing with them? Like, is it one of those like uphill battles, like I'll never win this if they personally are against it, not morally, but just like I don't smoke it, I don't like it. Is it a harder win? Because I would imagine if you're talking to somebody who partakes, that it's like we're aligned. We're talking about the same thing because
Right.
we're looking for this plant to win versus trying to fight this uphill battle.
I just need you to be open and listen, right? Because my job is to deprogram 100 years of stigmatization and noise.
Mm,
I will be the first to say cannabis isn't for everyone. Know who it's right for and who it's not for, and let that be informed by science and data. Right. We both have teenage kids, right? Like the conversation at home around, hey, when the time comes, when your brain is more fully developed, let's absolutely 100%, let's explore this and whether this is right for you. But right now, with a developing brain, I'm not super excited about you smoking weed.
hmm Their kids, the kids' friends probably think you're pretty cool though, because at least it says my mom's open-minded. It doesn't say that you have anything other than an open mind and
But
that you're not rigid.
But like, I don't blame you if you do, if you are rigid. And my like that mission is to like, can I get you to open up the door half, like just a crack, right? Just a crack to let some more information and some of those stories in because like this has been so helpful for so many people who were unable to find relief elsewhere. And it's been
Absolutely.
harmful for those who shouldn't be on it. So, like, how do we get everyone thinking in the world of ands? These things can both be true.
Do you find that it works best to start with science? Like if you're standing on the sidelines of the lacrosse game and you've got some, judgy parent that you're in a conversation with and they're kind of very rigid about it. and that they lean in and they want to learn. What works to open someone's mind from your experience?
It so differs and it's so unique to the person, right? Like to me, it's where I need to know a little bit more about you so we can start the conversation. I'm not here to change your mind necessarily. If you don't want to change it, that's great. I'm going to respect that. But let me just make sure, like my personal passion is like, let me just make sure you have all of your
Yeah,
information.
just get
So when
educated.
you're making a decision, you're coming at
Absolutely.
it with fully armed. Like people are smart, but let's get them the information they need. And
Yeah.
my own piece of this is I had stopped consuming cannabis and like probably consumed through regularly through college, and then you end up having kids, and I actually had stopped for a long time, and my pathway back to it was through the mother of a friend, right? 60 something, conservative older woman who swore by her magic cream. And she would come to Seattle and she would come to buy her magic cream at the dispensary. What was it? It was a topical THC product.
Mm.
Right? If she can have this amazing experience about her magic cream, coming from the background that she does, like there's just something here. We've got to go down this path.
Absolutely. I know that the Seeds of Change report made a big impact. Tell me more about it. Like what sparked the idea? And I guess, did that open up any conversations?
I can speak to this with a little bit of just like heavy-heartedness, primarily because I'm always right, and this is part of maybe pause and flow and really rethinking where we are as women at this age. But this really stems from what I was talking about with this industry's racial reckoning of what are we doing when we're disproportionately impacting a particular group of individuals, but the benefits of a legal industry are going to a different one. And like I guess I come at this because there's just still so much work to do, and I'm still so excited about what can be done. And you'll see this. What was really interesting in Washington State, we're one of the first recreational states to to license cannabis for adult use. And we don't have this idea of social equity when we build this program. But each subsequent state that legalizes can learn from the prior. And you see, Illinois coming after, New York coming after, and just saying, okay, how do we build this construct of social equity into how we build our cannabis market? And there are some profound failures, and there are within those profound failures still these amazing opportunities to actually make a difference. And I think that's, if I can pull back and just sort of look at it in its holistic view, like all of these things can be true. We can still keep going. There's still so much to be done. I was just chatting with an amazing individual out of New York. She's put together, originally started as a cannabis minor program at the Medgar Evers College there. It's part of SUNY. And they're now elevating that to a bachelor's program, and then now building job work opportunities and testing grounds to really put those skills that they are teaching in the state university to use in service of the broader industry. I look at that and go, and it's oversubscribed, right?
That's crazy progress.
Right? And they have high Black and brown participation in these programs. I look at that and go, this didn't exist 5 years ago.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, we
absolutely.
can look at that and say, hey, okay, amazing.
Part of a very healthy cannabis ecosystem. Like it's all
Yes,
kind of coming together in that way. What about you as far as Leafly that you're most excited about, like right now?
I am super excited about innovating outside this construct of being a public company. And for anyone who's followed this journey, Leafly went public with the SPAC craze in 2022. The fundamental premise really was access to capital, but we have not seen the movement we would need to see for that actual capital to materialize in the absence of federal legalization. So we've made the decision to really go back to being a private company, and that opens up a ton of space for us to innovate around our business model and the types of products and services we bring to market. And you may ask, well, what's the issue with being a public company? What couldn't you do? And we were NASDAQ listed, which meant things like we couldn't take rates. products. It would be they had an issue. If we're what's called a non-plant touching company. We're an ancillary services technology company, but because we work with companies who primarily derive revenues from marijuana related revenues, taking a take rate of that was a line that
Oh, interesting.
was not possible. And so, this was an organization that was always very focused on really maintaining that public company NASDAQ eligibility. But when you remove those kinds of constraints, like this pushes me right back into creative space around what else can we do, right? If we just talked about the one lesson I've learned as a CEO is like, oh, this is a constant set of like feeling like you fell down and trying something else. Like
Totally.
this opens up a whole new set of try something else options that I get excited about. And
What is the current business model out of curiosity? How does the business make
well,
money?
and this is a function really of these constraints we've been talking about. But we're an e-com marketplace, right? Where consumers place orders, go to your retailer to pick up those orders. And in most e-com consumer businesses, it's a take rate model based on what you're, right, by the consumer traffic that you're driving, that new customer you're bringing to that retail. But we've always monetized on the retailer advertiser side. So very much more an advertising heavy B2B revenue model. What does this mean then when you can actually monetize the consumer? And like there's just business model innovation that allows us to do that's a little more familiar and less clunky, and like not saying we are going in that direction, but I'm just really
Opens up the
excited about
possibilities.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that
Oh,
has
interesting.
not been there for pretty much the entire time I've been with this organization, which is almost
Yeah.
coming up on 6 years.
That probably gives you some creative juices and, allows you to kind of innovate and have different conversations
Exactly.
with your team, your leadership team. And so if you zoom way out and you think about the industry as a whole, 10 years from now, what do you anticipate it'll look like?
You think after, and Leafly's been around, we're 14, 15 years, right? You think we will have changed hearts and minds and have brought everyone along on this journey. And what I am constantly amazed by is we've just scratched the surface in terms of human understanding of this plant and its potential. So what does this mean again for really truly being able to answer that question for consumers? What should I try and buy? And thinking about that on a scale that's much broader than what we do today, because there's millions of people around the world who are still yet to discover the magic of the plant. So to me,
Absolutely.
the need for a Leafly will persist and only grows.
And if
How
there's somebody listening that wants to support Leafly or support you, how can they do that? What's the best way
Just
to help
start your
you?
journey on leafly.com or download our app on the iOS or Play Store and just send us what's working for you and give us feedback of what's not, because ultimately that's what we're so focused on, which is being able to answer that question and help guide consumers through that journey, and then help build all the licensed businesses that support this ecosystem.
Amazing. And what else do you want our listeners or me to know about you and about Leafly?
Start with openness and curiosity and make that determination for yourself about cannabis based on all of the new facts and data and science emerging. And I just want to hear from you. Like, tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm right. Tell me where you're scared. Tell me how I can help reduce that barrier for you on your journey.
I'm excited. Okay, so my final question for you, and thank you in advance for being on the podcast, is what fuels you?
I think I've said it a couple of times throughout this, which is curiosity, curiosity, curiosity. There's so much unknown. And isn't it so great that we get to spend every single minute of the day, if we want to, exploring that?
Totally. And don't you find that as you get older, you're getting more and more curious? I was just talking to one of my good friends yesterday and just saying, like, maybe it's some form of midlife crisis, but it's just this idea that I don't want to waste any time. I want to be consuming information and learning and stay curious around. I mean, I'm always curious about people, but I'm like so curious about information. And
I'm
I'm like obsessively using ChatGPT and just researching everything.
yes. And why, like, but like, I want to know facts. I want to know thoughts. I want to know ideas. I want to know you. I want to know what you went through. I want to know how you got here. And like sometimes I forget that we sometimes need to have a destination because I'm so engaged.
Oh my gosh,
with
I'm the same
it.
exact way. We would be like, it's a good thing you aren't my next door neighbor. We would be 24/7 hanging out. I'm like, you are my new favorite best friend. I'm like, I love this conversation. We just like, so fun.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really enjoyed our conversation, and I can't wait to see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this as well.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. If you'd like to check out past episodes to hear from more business leaders, go to fueltalent.com/podcast. And if you have a minute, please leave a review and rating on your favorite podcast app, or share this episode with a friend or colleague. Please share any feedback or interview suggestions for other guests by sending a message to podcast@fueltalent.com. I'm Shauna Swerland, and thanks again for listening.